Welcome everyone to the webinar. This is, we've done quite a few of these now over the past year and a half or so, and we're delighted to have some guest speakers here today as well. This webinar is all about developing student competencies through using simulations, of course. And well, we're delighted to have Shauna Jones here from Fraser University, BD Business School. Do you want to say hi, Shauna?
Good morning, everybody. It's nice to see people here today.
And we're also joined by Renata Schaefer as well, from Sonoma State University. So, welcome, Renata.
Thank you, Leon. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Good morning from sunny California.
So we are actually recording the session, just so everyone knows. And please feel free to put messages in the chat. We record the session so that we can share it afterwards with anyone who couldn't make it, but also we'll share with everyone who's here to a copy of the recording if you want to catch up. But yeah, please feel free to ask questions in the chat as we go. Although having said that, we'll try to keep some time at the end as well for dedicated Q&A time too. Yeah. What I'll probably do is take a few moments to go through some slides, just to give a bit of background on Edumondo, who we are, which is perhaps new to some of you who are joining. And we'll get into the conversation. I think Shauna and Renata, you both have some slides to show as well. But really, we're focusing today on competencies and developing skills through simulations. But it would be great to hear as well from you both on how you're using it, a little bit about your course, and hopefully some value for the attendees who perhaps are new to simulations as well. Okay, well, by the way, I should probably say I'm Leon Lloyd. I'm the Business Development Manager with Edumondo. And looking forward to getting into this. Okay, so a little bit about Edumondo. We've actually been operating for around 20 years. So since 2001, we've been developing all sorts of different management simulations. We have since branched out into other product lines as well, all focused on higher education. But still the core focus of what we do is simulations. We have around 40 members of staff, most of whom are based at our head office in The Hague in the Netherlands, although we have staff all over the world as well. And I'm calling in from the UK. We work with around 300 universities worldwide. And actually we're active in all continents of the world as well. We do have some experience also working with the private sector. So we support some corporates with their leadership development programs and talent acquisition programs as well. And as you can imagine, it's quite some students we're working with each year. So this slide will perhaps be a little bit useful, especially to those of you.
We don't see your slides, by the way.
Oh, really? Okay. Good point. Thanks, Milo. In that case, let me share my slides. That would help, wouldn't it?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, hopefully that's the end of the technical issues for the rest of the webinar. But for anyone who's new to simulations, and perhaps anyone who's perhaps used other simulations and aren't familiar with our approach, this slide will perhaps be a little bit useful, just explaining how it works. So all our simulations are all web-based, and they all work just off the browser as you'd expect. So there's no software to install as such, and you can access from any device. So students, if they want, can access from their smartphones. Although having said that, there's a lot of information to consume, so a big screen is always preferable. But we put students into teams, so it's very much a team-based activity, and students get a chance to manage their own company over a number of years in the simulation, represented as rounds in the simulation. So that's one round usually sitting within a week of study, although it's very flexible. From a time investment point of view, that's flexible as well. We often will, we often do these more intensively over 1 or 2 days, but it's more common that the simulations are spread across a semester. Highly competitive. So we have this dynamic algorithm in all our simulations, and that means that it's a very competitive setting. So rather than student teams playing against a computer and then seeing their scores ranked against other teams, they're directly competing against the other student teams, which is really important to make it as close to real life as possible. So, for example, if one team is winning a load of market share, they're directly taking that from their competitors. So students really get a sense that this is like as close to real life as you can get. We cater for all student levels as well. And I believe we'll be hearing from Renata with using it on an MBA class, and also from Shauna, who's using it on a first year class as well. We're also very flexible in terms of how we set these simulations up. So whilst we have quite a large portfolio of simulations, there's a lot we can do to make them fit with the topics that you want to study as well. In terms of some high-level things about sort of why use management simulations, well, it's often using them to support things like student engagement, of course. There's some very strategic wins that can be made by perhaps using simulations in certain parts of a course, either right at the very start to try to engage students and reduce dropouts early on, but also perhaps towards the end of a course when, it might be closer to when students are likely to be doing their satisfaction surveys and these sorts of things. Of course, employability skills or competencies really speak strongly to the whole graduate outcomes piece. And whilst the simulations are an opportunity for students to apply their theoretical knowledge, the skills part is just as important, the skills acquisition that students sort of gain from this opportunity as well. So last slide from me, just to give everyone an overview really of the sorts of things that we have. This slide really gives an idea of the various simulations that we have in our portfolio. So perhaps just to sort of say that, you can really get a sense here of the different subjects that we're covering. For example, international business, strategic marketing, strategic management. We even cater for sort of induction week simulations and can support open days as well. We have a business consultancy simulation, and we've even got a newer simulation which really focuses on sustainability as well. So trying to really bring in the whole ethics dimension into leadership and the ESG type themes as well. So very wide portfolio of simulations. I'm going to stop sharing now. Actually, no. What I will do, in fact, is I will move on to the next slide and hand over to you, Renata, to take over for a few slides.
Right. Thank you, Leon. With pleasure. So a little bit about our experience at Sonoma State University. The Edmundo simulation that we play in our MBA program at Sonoma State is the Phone Venture, International Business and Management Simulation. Students play it in the framework of an elective course seminar in international business. So there are two main objectives for this course. The first one is to increase the awareness and knowledge of international business environment. And the second one is to analyze and examine various opportunities and challenges that companies face when they start operating internationally. And this is where I see Phone Venture simulation really playing an important, very supportive role in reaching these objectives. When I chose the simulation, I saw it as a valuable learning tool that students will be able to put into practice all these concepts of international business that we discussed in the class. They are playing the simulation in teams, like it was mentioned. The first when I designed the simulation in the course, I actually designed it as one practice round. Students always want to have something to try to learn, without consequences in points, and then 5 graded rounds or real rounds. Then based on the students' feedback, I increased it to 2 practice rounds. One of the reasons why I did so, or what they approached me, that the simulation is relatively complex in terms of understanding, all the connections, and they wanted to actually play twice practice rounds to see if they approach after the first practice round was actually the correct one, and then really dive into it. So usually there are 2 practice rounds and 7 graded round. So they have both points for playing the simulation and also for the final results. It creates a little bit more this sense of competition and willingness to do well in the simulation as a team. Also, the reason why more rounds make sense is that each round, new countries open their borders. Since they run a phone venture, since they run for a smartphone company, they want to operate in different countries in the end, also with the aspiration to become a global leader. So the more rounds they have, the more they can truly spread their wings, so to speak, and in various regions of the world. It is a very engaging experience for a diverse student body. And it's a similar situation in other academic institutions. Our MBA students bring various educational and professional backgrounds to the table. So we have business students, but we also have students who completed a major in psychology, in sociology, computer science, engineering, healthcare, physics, you name it. So it's interesting in MBA programs that they learn the content of the program, but they also learn from themselves or from each other. And this is a very interesting experience also in terms of this simulation. Oh, it's all right. So it was too quick.
Yeah, it's a really diverse student body that you have then, Renata.
Right. We have a very diverse body, and this is a very stimulating also for students to see this different perspective. It was emphasized here in the reflection. So I ask students through the semester to play it and also be very mindful that in the end, I will ask them to submit a report based on the experience. And there are a couple of questions I asked them to reflect on the process itself, the most successful moments, and the greatest setbacks, but also some very straightforward questions like, what did you like best? And what is interesting that they emphasize how actually enjoyable this experience was for them, because it was like playing, like having the feeling running a real company. That they had the feeling that it was a real thing. And this is a strength of this simulation. It addresses various aspects of the company and ask them to actually develop the company from scratch, starting with the mission, with values, then choosing the strategy, then paying attention that all the internal processes are somehow in alignment, and of course being successful also on the markets. So they emphasize another very interesting point is that they like it that they were able to put actually into practice many of the theoretical concepts that they learned in the program, right? So what is in this course? The course is practically offered pretty much at the end of the program. It's a 2-year program, and the first year is dedicated to required courses, to core courses, and then the second year they have more electives, and this is one of the electives, and they truly appreciate the possibility to play it, to have this hands-on experience and see how everything actually comes together. They enjoy also the possibility to improve every time, so that they could see the consequences of their decisions, but also they were able to improve and discuss which direction or which improvement to make. Here, another question that I asked them is, what have you learned from this experience? And it's a question that has actually 2 parts. I asked them about the learning experience on international business and doing business internationally. But I also asked them to elaborate on the experience, on the learning process, what they learn individually, working in teams as a team member, what they learn on an individual level. So many of them emphasize this aspect of working as a team and learning from each other. And this is the moment when I truly see that this diversity has a benefit, a very substantial benefit. So students truly dedicate time to discuss the next steps. After each round, they have the possibility to reflect to analyze the results based on the reports that they received from the system, and then also to discuss what are the next steps. And they appreciate this possibility to just try new things, to share and collaborate on this issue, and see how they all can contribute in their own way. They also learn, and what I particularly like about this, that they learn to be more mindful in this process. So they realize that every country is different, it's very specific. So it's not anymore copy-paste exercise, being in one country and being successful and then using the same approach in another country, but they need to truly dedicate time to look a little bit more at the situation, what are the needs of the customer, what are the possibilities to for the local offices there, and also some cultural aspects as well. So this was an interesting experience for them to set goals and also to be able to truly analyze before they make final decisions. And something that it's actually the main topic here, what skills and competencies have you developed? All students emphasize teamwork, definitely teamwork skills, communication skills, being able to develop individually, being able also to develop the influential skills. But what they also, what is interesting here is that they learn to evaluate and analyze company as a whole, to see the whole picture, to see how everything is connected. So in this sense, improve the conceptual skills. Interesting feature, which I've never seen in any other simulation that I played before, is the marketing aspect and the possibility for students to upload their own marketing campaign. So in this sense, they can also, they indicated they improve marketing skills and of course, analytical skills. Every round, they have a lot of information, what were the consequences of their decisions and in which direction they can go to do even better and to improve the current ranking. So students always look for the rankings where the company is among these 11, let's say 11 teams that play the simulation, and they of course want to improve and want to do better. And what is good about this simulation, that they receive a feedback, some already suggestions in which direction they can go. But definitely through the many rounds that they were playing, they see a strong benefit in terms of improving these various skills and competencies that I mentioned. So thank you. This would be just the introduction from my side. I take it over to you, Liam.
Yeah, well, that's great. And yeah, well, perhaps maybe I'll stop sharing just for a moment and just, yeah, I think that was really interesting. And I think it's really great to get your perspective on things because, of course, you're using it for MBA students. And I think, yeah, so later we'll hear from Shauna as well on what it's like for a sort of first year undergraduate course as well. But I suppose I was particularly, there was a few things that you said which really resonated, I suppose. And what I think on the last slide about the comments from students about managing the whole company and seeing the whole picture, that's sort of really key, isn't it? Because whilst, of course, students can go on placements and things, and a lot of universities will have other sort of live projects perhaps that students can do. Sometimes, it's maybe maybe sometimes that those work better if they're very specialist courses. But if it's a generalist course like an MBA or something like that, then actually the simulation really gives the students, all this exposure to all these different parts, which sometimes they wouldn't get in a real placement, for example.
Yes, I totally agree. I think that they also, emphasize this, that having such a diverse team and bringing various perspectives help them avoid a tunnel vision. So some students with their financial background, already some experience in finance, they were particularly paying attention to financial aspects. But also this simulation has the design of the simulation is truly very helpful to keep this whole company picture. It's this balanced scorecard model that is used in this simulation. And you need to pay attention also to the internal processes, not only financial, but also non-financial, that truly, contribute to the final success. So I absolutely agree. And also when we see nowadays many programs, MBA programs is not an exception, many business programs tend to have more interdisciplinary approach in education. So not only, having this lens through business, through everything that is measurable, but also through this non-tangible assets of the organization, like reputation, like brand development, like attracting talented employees. And sustainability actually, fits very well in this concept. So yes, definitely, it's a good approach.
Yeah, and I suppose the interdisciplinary sort of approach works well on an MBA course because, as you said earlier, you've got all these, you've got all these students coming from different backgrounds, so they're able to bring different things to the mix. But even if it wasn't an MBA course, for example, we're often talking to universities, for example, who want to take a number of different programs and bring them all together within the simulation as well, and in that way have, each team composed of students with different specialisms who can all take responsibility for their own functional area, for example. But on an operational level then, Renata, how do you set the teams up, for example? Do you allow the teams to form themselves, or do you assign teams? And how does it sit across the semester, for example? Perhaps you could give us a bit more of the tangible aspects to how you run it.
Yeah, so it's interesting. It's a very interesting question because actually at the beginning of the program, they have a special session, an integration session, when they are taking various assessments. And in these various assessments, they are actually, receiving feedback in which areas are very, strong in their case, which could be, developed. And some teams are actually, on purpose built at the beginning of the program because they really want to work together through the program to develop these various areas or these various competencies that they intend to develop. But in some cases, students just decide with whom they are going to play. I'm not actually assigning teams, but turn out that this experience is so intense and different from the other experience that they had, that they get to know their colleagues from completely different side, from completely different angle. It's really like going much deeper in cooperation and exchange and communication. So some students tell me that they are actually relatively introvert and they are very careful in making decisions and taking into consideration, all aspects. But then in team, they learn they need to speak up. They need to, bring across their ideas because they believe it was really the right way to go. And it was proven that it was the right way to go. So it gave them some confidence. I mean, this is a learning process for everyone.
Sure. Okay. All right. Well, it's interesting because I often sort of start from the point with simulations that, the main purpose is to allow students to apply their subject matter theory. But of course, and then with that as a starting point, then I often sort of think of the skills acquisition as a really important byproduct of the experience. But actually, I think, Shauna, if I'm right in saying from your perspective, you're actually, so your course, the main purpose, I think the skills part, competencies, is the primary sort of purpose of the module, right? And on that note, I'll put the slides back up, and you can say your piece.
And can you give me that connection so that I can change the slides?
Sure. Yeah, done.
Perfect, thank you. So the course that I'm talking about is Business 202. It's Foundations for Collaborative Work Environments. And so these are students who are transferring in from other universities, college universities, and other schools. They could be international, they could be from faculties within Simon Fraser University, or they could be universities outside of SFU. And so the students coming in, it's a very interesting demographic in this course because they have anywhere from 30 credits to 90 credits, or sometimes even a bit more than that, and they're required to have 120 credits to graduate. So one of the challenges in this course is actually being able to keep everybody engaged when you've got some people who haven't been in university long and others who have, many people with no work experience and others with work experience, as well as we have approximately 50% of our students are international students in this course as well. So being schooled in other types of environments that are not necessarily focusing on active or engaged learning. So those are some of the challenges that we have. And one of the things that's really important for me in my teaching philosophy is to create learning experiences, significant learning experiences. And I draw on D. Fink's work for that. And so if we could go to the next slide, please. So we have our cap currently for the students is 90 students per class. We are just in the midst of revising this course and combining it with our welcoming course for the high school students, so that those two bodies of students will have the same experience. And so I'll be talking a little bit about how we're using the simulation now and how we plan on using it in the future. So right now we're using ProSim Classic. And one of the reasons why we selected Edumundo was because of the flexibility with setting up the simulation. And also very importantly, the fact that students are competing against each other and they can't get the answers online. So like with some other simulations, students can find answers to the simulation online, and that's not something that we wanted. We divide the students into teams of business units of 3 to 5 students, actually, 3 to 5 students. And they represent a national region of Asia, Europe, or North America. And then there's 3 business units that make up a company. And we did this purposefully. And prior to the pandemic, we were using a different kind of experience. It was a product management experience where students did a project with our bookstore. But going online, we needed to do something that could be used online, which we didn't realize it was going to be for 2 years, but it was for 2 years. And we liked the simulation so much that we've decided to stay with it. And it also scales up to what we're going to be doing in the fall of 2022. So we always had it designed that the smaller teams had to work together in a bigger company group. And the reason for that is because we felt that often in organizations, people are working maybe in an intact team or a small team, but then they have to communicate or work with other teams in the organization, and it creates a challenge. And that is one of the things that we wanted to also create in here, is to create some sort of challenge for the team so that they had to communicate across other teams as well and learn how to collaborate, not just within their business unit, but also within their company. So the business simulation experience, the students, as I mentioned, they're operating a company in 3 different regions of the world. The simulation is not exact. The things that are going on in each of the rounds in the simulation is not exactly the same for each of the different national regions. And so sometimes they might get a news item in Asia that's going to impact some of the decisions that they make, but Europe or North America hasn't had that same news item. So again, it creates some different learning experiences, and it makes them need to communicate with one another and share their learnings, which I can tell you that in the beginning of the semester, they're not necessarily doing that because they're still trying to learn the simulation and work within their own unit. And so usually I do a midpoint check-in and I ask them how they're doing with their company, and I find out that they're not communicating, and that's not with all companies. Some of the companies have got it all figured out. They set up inventory charts, they set up Excel spreadsheets for charting inventory, and they share that with the other business units, whereas some just stay completely siloed. And so that's a great learning experience for them. And then we start, after the check-in, you'll start to see them work more across the business units to help one another, which I think is one of the things that we're really trying to aim for. So I'll just switch to the next slide.
I think though, just if I may, Shauna, just chip in a little bit. Perhaps it's useful for the audience as well to, if I just say that I think that this is particularly interesting, this way of doing it, because I would say that the perhaps the more common way of allocating the roles and the responsibilities is to do it more by operational department. So you maybe have one person who's more responsible for the HR, and then another person who's responsible for the operations and so forth. So actually mixing it up in this way and doing it more by geographic location, I think is quite interesting actually.
Well, and thanks for bringing that up, Leon, because the other thing that students have to figure out for themselves, I'm just going to back up for a second. This is an explicit team learning course. So we are teaching them about collaboration skills while they are collaborating. So the simulation is actually the venue through which they are doing their learning. It's the venue through which they are collaborating. And so in this particular iteration of the course, we're not so focused on the different business aspects. We want them to be reintroduced to them, but most of the students have already taken intro courses because they're transfer students. So they have to have some business courses before they come in. And so it reminds them when they're working in their business units, they often get to a point where they then decide to set roles for one another because they're basically in charge of how they run their team. They're given resources. We talk about how teams run. We talk about things that work and don't work. And then it's up to them to decide. And they have us. So they have me as the instructor or whoever else is instructing in the course. And they have 2 TAs usually. Sometimes we have more students, we have more TAs, but we're there as coaches for them. And so then they might divide up and have an HR person and a marketing person, and then they figure out how that works within their companies as well. So I'm glad you brought that up. Okay. Some of the when we're dividing them into teams, also, I just want to draw on that a little bit. I'm very intentional about creating diverse teams. We have a team sort survey that they actually fill out in advance, and they let us know kind of where they spent most of their schooling, how many years work experience do they have, some of the things that they're comfortable doing. I also have information about what level they are in terms of how many credits they have towards their degree so that we can mix them up there. During COVID, we initially had people mixed up, read time zones, and then after the first semester, we realized that that was a mistake. And we really needed to put people in similar areas of the world so that the time zones weren't so different, because that was just so stressful for them. And so now we're back to making sure that the teams have as much, not just diversity of ethnicity, but also diversity of thought, diversity of experience. And so those are the things that we're looking at doing. Yeah, and so as I mentioned, this is really about collaboration. So our main objective is to have students in this course, our main objective is to have students build on their collaboration and interpersonal skills and emotional intelligence so that they can take that into the other team experiences that they will have in the rest of BD and in the BD School of Business, and then also into the workplace. again, different students have different experiences. I find the students who have more work experience really grasp the course and the importance of the skills that they're developing more than those that don't. But they all get something. They all walk away with something, unless they're just like completely out of it and don't want to participate, which happens occasionally. They like the simulation. I haven't done official surveys on this, but they like using the simulation as a way to develop as a team, and also as a way to remind themselves of some of the business fundamentals that they're going to be using in other courses. So some of the learning that's come out from these are, we just did a research project, actually. My colleague Desiree Stack and I, who's our experiential learning coordinator, we did a research project in fall of 2020, looking at how we were still creating community and building resilience, and what students were getting out of the use of the simulation. And also we have a launch orientation for them. And so the big part was that people were feeling like they belonged to something, which was part of our goal, right? And all the learning activities, the simulation and all the other things that we do are all integrated in such a way that we want students to have that experience. They learned a lot about their personal traits and how that impacted them as a team. And one of the things that's really important in this is, yes, we have them do presentations on how they did in the simulation and why they made decisions in the simulation, et cetera, but we're also seeing how they collaborated and the different things that they've learned about collaboration through that process. And so understanding their own personal traits and also their own defensiveness and things like that. When those get in the way or when they're in conflict, how their behavior may impact their team was really important. This also gave them an opportunity to step up. So Renata talked about how some students were more introverted or more quiet, and they didn't necessarily want to speak up. And through the process of working on the simulation, if they didn't share their ideas, their ideas never got used. And so this is a big piece of the learning, particularly for our international students, because a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them are uncomfortable sharing, depending on their level of language competency. And so we've had the teams actually develop in such a way that they've supported and coached one another to be able to do the presentation at the end, which I think is a great thing. I think it's great. Increased self-awareness is huge. As I said to you before, the collaboration skills are huge. And that really comes across. And I think the other thing that I want students to learn is how to reach out and draw on resources that are available to them, instead of thinking that they have to do it all themselves, because that's an important skill in the workplace. And so using the Edumundo help desk is so important. And they'll often be a little bit nervous about doing that, or they'll think, oh, we'll figure it out ourselves. I don't know whether it's just business students or what, but it's like, or whether it's human nature, but it's we'll figure it out ourselves. And they don't even ask their other team members within their company. They'll work within their in-tech team, but they don't think about going to the other team members sometimes. So the help desk, I will encourage them. I will not even answer some of their questions about the simulation, because I want them to reach out to the help desk, because it's fantastic. And the answers and the responses that they get back are really, really helpful to them, and far better than how I could answer those questions. So that's one thing that I really liked, and get them to try to do. I think the other thing too is we're really trying to build students' resilience. We want them to leave with a sense of self-esteem, and that they're capable of doing a whole bunch of things. Remember, these are transfer students. They're coming in as their first semester as a BD business student, and that's really important to them. And they're nervous and they're excited. And so to walk that they feel more confident in our environment and in the business school and hence in the world, I think serves us well, and it certainly serves them well. And I love this comment from this student. talking about how the student was afraid. The student was afraid of speaking out, and yet was very bright, had lots of great ideas. And in the larger company, they just encouraged him to keep doing this. And so, he ended up believing that I can do this, right? He ended up feeling a lot more secure. And I think that's about it for me. I don't think I have anything else unless there's some questions that Leon has.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, actually, so it felt really nice, actually, what you were saying about the fact that students are doing this as very early on in their course, before they've actually really maybe covered a lot of the theory. Of course, that theory, they can then reference their experience within the simulation later on as they then learn the theory, for proper inside the curriculum. But I also was thinking that, isn't it nice in a way that very early on in their university experience, they can almost get this kind of like a live skills audit, really. They're playing in the simulation. They're really learning, as they go, where their strengths are, where their weaknesses are, where perhaps there's areas they need to improve. And so from a competencies perspective, they've then got the whole of the rest of their university life and experience to really work on those and then come out at the end, which is kind of converse to the more traditional approach to education, isn't it? Which is, we go into education and we prepare ourselves for work. And then when we start work officially, that's when we start to gain these competencies. Well, no, it's definitely shifting the other way around now, isn't it?
Well, and that was done on purpose because about 7 years or 8 years ago, we did some research with employers, and the employers were saying that they weren't getting students who had good skills of working with others. And so that was a communication competency that they wanted. And I started to do some research about 3 years ago about how we were building the working with others competency within our own core undergraduate courses, and found out that we weren't using explicit team learning at all. There was a lot of implicit team learning. So teams would work on projects, but they would not necessarily learn about teaming at the same time that they're working on those team projects. So when we implemented that, the big thing was that they had a good, positive opportunity to work together as a team in a venue like, for instance, the simulation, so that they could build those skills. And in that research project, I learned it needs to be delivered early on and then reinforced throughout the rest of the program. Hence why we're changing in the next iteration to have all students get this, but we'll be combining the fundamental business skills. So more explicit about that, as well as being explicit about the team learning skills. And the simulation we're going to use for that one is the trainer startup. And I'm really excited about how the simulations have really worked for us in terms of the skills that we're wanting students to develop and how that will work in the future.
Yeah. Well, yeah, good points, Shauna. And we have a question, I think, from Roger. So, Roger, I'm not sure if you want to come off mute and perhaps ask your question. You're more than welcome to, if you're able to. Are you able to see the question as well, Shauna?
Yes, I am. So the question from Roger is, I get the impression teams set are according to my ideas of diversity. This is clearly not true in the real world, where teams would be preferably structured to a specific objective, and the structure follows strategies, applies to the building of teams as well. Absolutely. And so in the past way that we set up the teams, we looked at the different functions because that's how the groups were set up. In this particular case, for our particular case, we thought that these are the easiest things for us to set up a diversity within the group and ensure some of it, remembering that some of our students don't have specific skills in accounting or marketing or HR. But that's certainly one of the ways that we've done it in the past. So I use it context-based, not necessarily just kind of what my thought of diversity is supposed to be.
Yeah, okay.
The other, yeah.
No, go on.
No,
okay.
it's okay. Yeah.
Okay, all right. And well, perhaps, maybe a question for both of you, but perhaps Renata, I was going to say as well, like, we spoke before, I know, some time ago about the idea of, like, generally in terms of the way that students, so the interface which students have to deal with, like the online interface, the user experience, and all of this. And I think, Renata, you were talking about like how that links to what students' expectations are, like the modern younger students who perhaps are used to working with these online tools and online apps and that sort of thing. So I just wondered if you wanted to say anything about that.
Yes, so I agree that this young generation is very interested to have access to the innovative pedagogical tools, and they appreciate the simulation and the layout and the possibility to navigate these different areas of company. And yeah, definitely there's a lot of positive feedback about how user-friendly is the simulation and how easy to navigate. It does not mean that it is easy to play. I mean, students need to make decisions, and these are various aspects of organization they need to address. But what they like is that they have a lot of options in the simulation itself to choose from. So in deciding about the values, for example, they are already, some of them listed, they make them more, like focus on, okay, so these are primarily values we want to keep in mind while developing strategy. Then there's also a nice way to make decisions using this all possibilities in various areas. So students feel that they are supported by the whole process. Right, so I received a lot of positive feedback how the simulation, that they like it. And of course, this part, which I mentioned already, the possibility to upload their own marketing campaign and a press release. So this was something that they truly, get involved into and come up with very creative ideas. I asked them to look at the country they are currently operating, look at the cultural specific of this country, and come up with slogan, with logo or symbols that somehow they believe would resonate with this region or this country, and upload it and share with everyone. Because in this part of simulation is visible to all groups, so they can also just inspire each other. I just wanted to say it's a very nice and innovative feature.
Renata, did you give them extra points for uploading those?
Yes. This is another thing that students like to be rewarded. And so at the beginning, it's always, what is the expectations? I share with them that they receive points for playing, but also for final achievement. I give extra credit to groups that I can see that they progressed very nicely through the process. I also give them extra points for, it's not actually extra, but they have a requirement of 3 upload marketing campaigns in the process. The more they do, there's also some additional extra points for this, but they usually are doing all more than 3. And then final report and presentation. And they also have a peer review section that they can give feedback about everyone's involvement, engagement. So that I also, they do a lot of meetings outside a classroom. So I cannot really, control how everyone is involved. But based on the presentation and how they speak, it's really visible to me that everyone did his or her part.
Yeah, we often find that it's the really enjoyable part of the simulation, or the whole experience is enjoyable and challenging, of course, as you've said. But like the creating your own logo, the naming your company, that part really gives the teams a sense of ownership of their company, and it really feels like it's their company, of course. And then, yeah, as you say, the marketing plans and the press releases are these really nice extra pieces, really, aren't they, within the simulation? I'm just going to throw out to the audience now and just sort of say, please have a think of some questions to ask Renata and Shauna. It's a good opportunity now to ask questions and get their experiences of how they've used the simulation. So please do ask some questions in the chat, or if you prefer to put your hands up, or your virtual hands up, then we can unmute you and you can ask a question if you like as well. So please do that.
I see a question from Roger about conflict. that the simulation will trigger some level of conflict in the team, and how do we manage this? So Roger, we have 3 modules, so 3 classes that focus on conflict management and hosting productive conflict. And part of that process is to get them to explicitly discuss some of the things that may be going on in their teams. And once that happens, it usually starts to diffuse some of the conflict. As well, we have them give feedback to one another face-to-face. It's not anonymous feedback. And they do that in a group setting, which is a little unrealistic because we wouldn't do that in the workplace, but at the same time, it works. And that helps create more openness in their environment so that they do talk about issues that are coming up in their teams. And then we're also available for them for coaching as well.
Yeah, I think I just remembered, I can't remember if it was one of the comments on your slides, Shauna, or on yours, Renata, but one of the comments was around the teams. In some of the teams, they felt like there was clearly 1 or 2 dominant members of the team, and that maybe had an impact on some of the quieter ones who weren't sure if it was okay for them to have a voice. And so it was really, I think they really found it quite useful in terms of how they reflected and how they encouraged those perhaps quieter parts of the group to have their voice, because of course they all had something to add, right?
Well, and part of it is like our coaching as well, because we do have periodic check-ins, and the literature talks about how important the periodic check-ins with teams are, so that you can deal with some of the conflict that occurs. And what I found in some other courses where there isn't that time is that students feel that they're just kind of left on their own. And so that's one of the pieces that we've been doing. And we want conflict to arise because we want them to see the difference between productive conflict and unproductive conflict. And we want them to be able to learn how to talk about it, because I could say that that's where a lot of the teams fail from my experience in watching teams over the years. They just want to stuff it under the carpet, and it doesn't necessarily work. Yeah.
Well, and of course, the conflict replicates the real world of work as well, right? Which is as much as I think is relevant, because that's also what we're trying to do as much as possible with these teams, is give students a real flavor of what it's like in the real world, isn't it? Mm-hmm. We have another question as well from Anne. Shauna, how do you deal with assessment if the goal is building communication skills? Does the group result ranking in the simulation impact their assessment?
Yes, we've tried assessments in a number of different ways. And right now we're using something within our school that's online. It can be loaded into our LMS. And one of the things it talks about is communication. So we look at some of the key skills that students need to have in working in teams, and then they rate each other on those, and then we get to observe. They also give appreciative and coaching feedback around that.
Okay. And a question for both of you, I guess, from Joel. Joel, thanks for your question. Was it a challenge to get approval? Approval from IT to use these simulations. It takes forever at our university to get approval to use new software. So, Joel, that's not a budget question then, Joel? That's specifically around IT, right? I think that's the case. But perhaps I don't know, Renata, if you have any views on that.
So we have also a procedure, the check. It's more complicated when there is any software involved with the simulation. When the simulation is played completely online, like it's in this case, it's much easier. There is a checklist. So we also need to report that we are going to use the simulation. And they are checking actually Edmundo background and then all the tools that they have available to protect actually the users. And I remember receiving something from Pace or from Milo, from Julian, that was supportive in this process. So definitely there are some requirements right now in IT, but we were able somehow to go through this process relatively smoothly. So probably it depends from university to university, but I know from my previous experience when there was any software connected with downloading, then there was much more complicated to get the approval.
Yeah, but certainly we have, as you say, Renata, we have a document which we can send, which you can pass on, Joel, to your IT department, which should answer all of the relevant questions, around VLE integration, around sharing personal data, storage, and where servers are located. These are all typically the questions that we get asked every time a simulation is used at an institution, and we have we're able to answer all of them, and it's usually not a problem once we've had that discussion. Anyone else with any questions? Feel free to put them in. And perhaps while we're seeing if there's any more questions, I was just going to say more generally, I suppose, to both of you. Are there any other considerations, do you think, to ensure success when using simulations, which might be helpful for other academics who are new to this?
I think it's really helpful to have the support of your chair, or in our case, it's our associate dean, and to have, we are now working to be an experiential school, and that's really changed the kind of supports that are available to us to have simulations like this. So we actually have an experiential manager, experiential education manager, which I think really helps in the faculty be able to do what needs to be done without spending a whole bunch of extra hours trying to make it happen. And I think we're very fortunate in that way, and I'm really thankful for that. But as we've gotten more support from our administration, it's made it much easier. Yeah. Okay.
Renata, what about you? Any thoughts?
Yeah, so I can agree with Shauna fully. The support is very helpful in designing courses that truly resonate with current students in the most effective ways. This young generation wants to know why something happens, want to see this cause-effect relationship. So just this type of tools are so supportive and resonate so well with them. I additionally appreciate the support that Edmundo introduced. Just the last semester, we had more possibility to directly connect with the Q&A. So students, we scheduled this. The challenge was the time difference zone, but any other things were truly wonderfully organized, and I appreciate the feedback that we received, addressing some questions from students, and also giving them in the middle of the run, they are receiving some tips and tricks, those teams that are not performing so well, in which direction to go. So I think this type of support is also very appreciated in experiential learning as well.
Completely agree with that.
Great. Okay. And do you both get certificates as well for your students, like participation or winners certificates as well?
Yes.
We have not done that, and so we'll be looking at how we do that in the future.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it seems like people are saying these days that the modern CV these days is LinkedIn, right? That the traditional CV is dead. I mean, I'm not sure if I completely agree, but I think I get the point, isn't it? So I think having these certificates, especially digitally, after the simulation, that students can share on LinkedIn and be encouraged to share as well. That's sort of really starting them even from an early stage. Shauna, in the case of your students, and well, for the MBA students as well, Renata, I suppose, really getting them to think about their online presence, their online CVs, and starting to take that seriously, which is so important, isn't it now?
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's been really useful. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring up this last slide and say to everyone who's attending that, if you have any questions about anything else that we've discussed or anything that we didn't discuss to do with simulations, then feel free to let us know. You can contact me on that email address there, or you can get in contact with any of our colleagues or through our website, of course, as well. Shauna and Renata, it's been really great talking to you. Thanks so much for giving up your time to do this. It's morning for both of you, so I guess you can get on with your days now.
Off to the next meeting, and thanks Renata for being on this together. That was nice to meet you.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you so much also for this possibility to share. I am also open to share any additional support materials that I develop for this simulation if someone is interested in terms of how I document how you can assess your students. through the all support students in the process. So I am also I'm available for sharing this or giving some support if needed. But it was a great pleasure for me, and thank you, Shauna, also. I see there are so many similarities in this experience. Even then, your simulation was at the beginning of the program, mine is at the end of the program, but it seems that both are available for students.
Absolutely. And I'm also available and put my email in chat.
Oh, great. Yeah, no, thank you both for that.
Renata.
And thanks to all the participants who joined. We really appreciate you joining us. And yeah, we'll share a copy of the recording afterwards as well. So that's fine. But no, I think it was really great actually to get, to have both of you on, because having, the sort of the two ends of the spectrum, really, that right at the start and the MBA, that's really great.
Thank you.
That was
Thanks
useful.
for everybody who was here.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks a lot. Okay, take care.